black billionaire pretended to be in a coma, but when he heard his nurse's confession, everything changed. The private wing of Meridian Medical Center was silent save for the rhythmic beeping of machines. Jackson Harlow, 45, founder and CEO of Solaris Innovations, had been lying motionless for 15 days. The mysterious malfunction of his private helicopter had left him with a jagged scar across his right temple, the only visible reminder of the crash that nearly claimed his life, or so everyone thought. What no one knew was that Jackson had regained consciousness on the 4th day. After overhearing a disturbing conversation, he made the calculated decision to keep his eyes closed and his breathing steady. Jackson needed answers about who had tried to kill him, and his apparent coma provided the perfect cover for gathering intelligence. It's infuriating when people think they can take advantage of you, isn't it? When they assume you don't have the strength or intelligence to fight back. If you've been in this situation, write the word strength in the comments and let us know where in the world you are watching from. Now let's continue. The board is getting anxious, Charlotte, said Philip Harlow, Jackson's younger half-brother and chief operating officer. His voice carried from the hallway through the partially open door. The quarterly projections are due next week. I'm handling it, replied Charlotte Harlow, Jackson's wife of 5 years. Her tone was clipped, businesslike. Dr. Mercer assured me the latest scans show significant deterioration. Just a few more days and the succession clause can be activated. And what about Naomi Chen? Philip asked. His legal pit bull? Charlotte laughed softly. I've taken care of it. Anonymous tips about client fund mismanagement tend to keep attorneys rather busy. By the time she clears her name, we'll be running the company. Inside the room, beneath his mask of unconsciousness, Jackson's mind raced. The helicopter crash hadn't been an accident, but the beginning of an elaborate coup. His empire, built from nothing into one of the most innovative clean energy companies in the world, was being stolen right from under him. The door opened fully, and unfamiliar footsteps entered, lighter, more deliberate than the hospital staff he'd grown accustomed to. Good evening, Mr. Harlow. The voice was warm but professional, without the artificial cheeriness many used with unconscious patients. I'm Zoe Ellis, your new night nurse. Jackson detected a faint scent of lemongrass as she moved around the room, checking his vitals with efficient movements. Your readings are consistent, she noted, making entries on his chart. That's promising. There was a pause and then the light creak of someone settling into the chair beside his bed. I don't know if you can hear me, Zoe continued, her voice lower now, almost confidential, but there's something you should know. I'm not supposed to be here. Jackson maintained his even breathing while his curiosity peaked. I was hired 2 days ago after your previous nurse resigned unexpectedly, she explained. But last night I found inconsistencies in your treatment records. Your sedation levels are significantly higher than protocol for your condition, and there are unexplained gaps in your neurological assessments. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. I'm actually specialized in forensic neurology, and I can tell you with certainty that someone is deliberately keeping you sedated, impeding your recovery. Jackson felt a surge of hope, an ally when he needed one most. I don't know who's behind this or why, Zoe continued, but I promise I'll help you. I'm going to gradually reduce your sedation. No one will notice the adjustment, but you should begin showing signs of consciousness within days. The door swung open abruptly. Just completing the hourly check, Dr. Mercer, Zoe said, her tone instantly transforming into professional detachment as she stepped away from the bed. Thank you, nurse. I'll take it from here. When the door closed, Jackson felt simultaneously alarmed and encouraged. In a world where he seemed entirely alone, he'd discovered an unexpected ally. What Zoe couldn't know was that he was already conscious, and behind his closed eyelids a counter-offensive was taking shape. What no one in that sterile hospital room could possibly suspect was that the man they believed helpless had built his company precisely because he recognized opportunities where others saw only obstacles. And now, lying motionless, while they plotted to steal everything he'd created, Jackson was already planning not just his recovery but the spectacular downfall of those who had gravely underestimated him. On the 3rd night after meeting Zoe, Jackson took his first risk. As she adjusted his IV, he deliberately twitched his index finger, twice. Zoe froze, eyes widening. You "You're conscious," she whispered. Another twitch. Her expression shifted from shock to determination. "We need a code," she murmured, checking the door. One movement for yes, two for no. That night, while the hospital slept, they developed a rudimentary communication system. Zoe brought a tablet with letters that Jackson could select with eye movements, painstakingly slow but effective. His first complete message stunned her. "Helicopter sabotaged." "Who would do that?" Zoe asked, disbelief evident in her hushed voice. "Charlotte." "Philip." "Horizon Project." Horizon was the revolutionary solar energy system. Solaris was developing a technology that could provide affordable clean energy to underserved communities at a fraction of current costs. Jackson had kept the most groundbreaking aspects of the project compartmentalized, sharing full details with only his most trusted team members. During daylight hours, Zoe observed, Philip visited frequently, always with Dr. Mercer in tow, reviewing charts and asking calculated questions thinly veiled as concern. Charlotte appeared rarely. When she did, she never touched Jackson, her eyes instead cataloging the room like an appraiser. "I've been investigating," Zoe informed Jackson one evening after securing the door. "Your legal counsel Naomi Chen is fighting fabricated ethics charges. They've created quite the paper trail against her." Jackson's jaw tightened, a small movement but the first sign of his returning motor control. "Don't worry," Zoe smiled confidently. "I've sent her an anonymous warning with details about who's behind it. Miss Chen is brilliant. She'll connect the dots." Meanwhile, Philip accelerated his timetable. Zoe managed to record a hallway conversation between him and Dr. Mercer using her phone. "The board votes Monday," Philip said, checking his watch impatiently. "We need the final neurological assessment confirming permanent impairment." "It's nearly complete," Mercer replied nervously, "but that new night nurse has been asking questions about his medication levels and previous charts." Philip sighed. "She's just a nurse. If she becomes problematic, replace her." What neither suspected was that Jackson wasn't merely gathering intelligence, he was regaining strength. Under Zoe's guidance, he performed small exercises when alone, flexing muscles, wiggling toes, preparing for the moment to strike back. On the sixth night, Zoe brought a visitor. "Someone needs to examine you properly," she whispered, locking the door behind them. An authoritative woman approached the bed. "Mr. Harlow, I'm Dr. Winslow, independent neurological specialist. Zoe consulted me about your case." For 20 minutes, Dr. Winslow conducted a thorough examination without equipment that might alert hospital staff. As suspected, she finally concluded, there's no indication of permanent neurological damage. The continued heavy sedation is unethical and potentially criminal. He's being artificially maintained in this state. "We need conclusive evidence," Zoe insisted. "Something irrefutable for legal action." "I have an idea," Dr. Winslow replied, opening her medical bag. "But it's risky and requires Mr. Harlow's complete cooperation." The Solaris Innovations boardroom hummed with tension Monday morning. 12 board members in impeccable business attire assembled around the mahogany table, prepared to vote on the temporary transfer of executive authority. "Ladies and gentlemen," Philip began smoothly, distributing folders. "As these medical reports confirm, my brother has unfortunately suffered irreversible brain damage. Dr. Mercer recommends immediate leadership transition to stabilize the company." Gabriella Odom, the board's most senior member and Jackson's longtime mentor, examined the documents with evident skepticism. "This seems remarkably convenient, Philip. Jackson was in perfect health before the accident. Tragedies happen unexpectedly, Gabriella." Charlotte interjected with practiced sympathy. "No one is more devastated than I am." Gabriella noticed Charlotte wasn't wearing her wedding ring, despite her husband supposedly fighting for his life. "We all respect what Jackson built," Philip continued smoothly, his voice masking the ambition beneath. "But we must be practical. Our stock has dropped 15% since the accident. Investors require stability." What Philip didn't realize was that Gabriella was surreptitiously recording the meeting on her phone. A plan was unfolding, not his but Jackson's, and while the conspirators believed themselves one step from victory, They remained oblivious that Jackson Harlow was preparing for the most dramatic entrance of his life. At that very moment, in Meridian Medical Center, Zoe exchanged meaningful glances with Dr. Winslow as they reviewed results from specialized neurological tests they had conducted secretly. The readings showed something remarkable. The supposedly comatose patient had regained significantly more control than anyone might have guessed. "Ready for phase 2? Zoe asked softly. Jackson's eyes opened fully for the first time in weeks, and a determined smile formed on his lips. "More than ready," he replied, voice raspy from disuse but charged with resolve. "They think they're claiming my company," he continued, slowly sitting up with Zoe's assistance. "They have no idea what's coming." The CEO everyone believed lost in the shadows of unconsciousness was merely waiting for the perfect moment to emerge, not just to reclaim what was rightfully his but to reveal a truth that would shatter foundations and expose corruption reaching far beyond his family's betrayal. A truth that even Zoe, his most loyal ally, couldn't have imagined. "If there are no further questions," Philip announced to the board, "we'll proceed to vote on the leadership transition as recommended by Dr. Mercer." Gabriella raised her hand. "One final question. Why isn't Dr. Mercer here to explain his findings personally?" Philip and Charlotte exchanged quick glances. Unfortunately, the doctor was called away for an emergency, but his report is quite comprehensive. As comprehensive as his integrity, Philip. The authoritative voice resonated through the boardroom, causing all heads to turn toward the entrance. Jackson Harlow stood in the doorway, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, leaning slightly on an ebony cane. Beside him, Zoe and Dr. Winslow observed the shocked reactions. Naomi Chen, his attorney, followed with a leather portfolio. Charlotte knocked over her water glass. Philip froze, color draining from his face. "That's impossible," he stammered, rising unsteadily. "You're in a coma," Dr. Mercer confirmed. "Dr. Mercer," Jackson interrupted, walking deliberately to the center of the room, "is currently being questioned by state medical board investigators regarding falsified records and criminal negligence." Dr. Winslow stepped forward, placing neurological test results on the table. "As an independent specialist, I can confirm Mr. Harlow was kept artificially sedated without medical justification. His natural recovery was deliberately sabotaged." "Ridiculous," Charlotte protested, composure crumbling. "My husband suffered a terrible accident." "A remarkably convenient accident," Jackson countered coldly. "A helicopter with flawless maintenance records suddenly experiencing catastrophic mechanical failure just as you were pushing for greater control of Horizon." Naomi opened her portfolio, distributing documents to each board member. "These are communications between Charlotte Harlow and Philip Harlow in the weeks preceding the crash. Note specific references to creating a permanent solution to the Horizon obstacle." "This is absurd." Philip attempted to regain control. "Obviously we were discussing technical challenges to the project, not Jackson." Jackson smiled thinly. "Zoe," the nurse stepped forward with her phone playing a recording. "Philip in the hospital corridor with Dr. Mercer. Keep him sedated until the board vote. Then we can let nature take its course. A patient in his condition. Complications happen." The board members watched in horror. This is manipulated footage," Philip sputtered, face flushing with panic. "Forensic neurology expert," Zoe corrected calmly. "With digital evidence certification. And we have much more." Naomi presented additional documents. Bank records showing substantial payments from an offshore account linked to Philip into Dr. Mercer's personal account beginning 1 week before the helicopter crash. Gabriella stood, visibly furious. "This is unconscionable. Attempted murder, corporate fraud, betrayal of family and shareholders alike." Jackson approached Philip, who retreated backward. "What fascinates me most, brother, is how you and Charlotte truly believed you could destroy me so easily. As if I, who built this company despite every obstacle, every dismissal, every door slammed in my face, would simply surrender." Charlotte, seeing their plot disintegrate, played her final card. "Jackson, darling, you're confused, still affected by medication. We were only protecting your interests." "Enough," Jackson cut her off icily. Did you pawn your wedding ring, or simply put it away for convenience? Security personnel had quietly entered the boardroom. Mr. Harlow, the chief of security, addressed Jackson. Police detectives are waiting in the lobby. Should we escort Mr. Harlow and Mrs. Harlow to them? Please. As the guards approached, Philip panicked. You don't understand. Horizon will obliterate our most profitable contracts. Investors will flee. He's sacrificing decades of work for a charity project. It's not charity, Jackson replied calmly, as Philip was led away. It's progress, and the investors have already endorsed it. The funding was secured last night. When the room cleared, leaving only the stunned board members, Jackson finally sat in the chair Philip had occupied minutes earlier. For a moment, exhaustion showed on his face. We thought we'd lost you, Gabriella said quietly, touching his shoulder. I would have been lost, Jackson acknowledged, looking at Zoe. If someone hadn't refused to be complicit in an injustice when it would have been easier to remain silent. What no one in that boardroom could have anticipated was that the conspiracy against Jackson Harlow had revealed something far deeper than family betrayal. Behind the expressions of relief and congratulations, a more disturbing truth awaited discovery, one connecting the assassination attempt to a network far more powerful and insidious than Charlotte and Philip alone. The justice achieved that day was merely the opening move in a larger game, where the true motives for suppressing Project Horizon involved some of the most influential figures in the country. And as Jackson watched Zoe speaking with Naomi, one question persisted in his mind. How deep did this nurse's loyalty to a stranger truly go? The answer would soon transform not only his company, but his understanding of trust, power, and the true meaning of legacy. Something isn't adding up, Jackson told Naomi 3 weeks after reclaiming Solaris Innovations. They sat in his redesigned office, the city skyline visible through expensive windows. Charlotte and Philip don't have the connections or resources to orchestrate something this complex. Naomi nodded, reviewing financial records on her tablet. I've been tracking the money. The offshore account that paid Dr. Mercer received funds from the Shell Corporation linked to Kingston Holdings. Kingston. Jackson frowned. Marcus Kingston Holdings. Kingston. Jackson frowned. Marcus Kingston sits on our board. Yes, Naomi confirmed. And he's been unusually quiet since your return. Jackson leaned back, pieces falling into place. Marcus Kingston had been his most vocal supporter during Solaris's early struggles, fervent guidance, opening doors, providing crucial introductions to investors. The mentor who'd seemingly believed in Jackson when no one else would. Find everything you can on Kingston's other business interests, Jackson instructed. Something tells me our trusted friend has been playing a longer game than we realized. Later that day, Jackson met Zoe in the company's rooftop garden. She'd accepted his offer of a temporary consulting position to help implement hospital ethics reforms funded by Solaris. You seem troubled, she observed, studying his expression. Kingston, Jackson replied simply. All evidence points to him as the mastermind. Charlotte and Philip were just pawns. Zoe tensed almost imperceptibly. What will you do? Spring a trap, Jackson explained. I've called an emergency board meeting tomorrow to discuss concerning developments with Project Horizon. Only Kingston will receive detailed briefing materials with subtly altered specifications. You think he'll leak them? I'm counting on it, Jackson confirmed. If he's working with outside interests to sabotage Horizon, we'll know within hours. Zoe hesitated. There's something I should tell you, Jackson. Before she could continue, his phone chimed with an urgent message from Naomi Breakthrough. Kingston's daughter-in-law is Energy Secretary Howard's chief of staff. Need to meet immediately. I'm sorry, Jackson apologized, standing quickly. This can't wait. Can we continue this evening? Zoe nodded, her expression unreadable. Of course. What Jackson couldn't know was that the truth Zoe needed to share would change everything, and time was running out for her to reveal it on her own terms. The emergency board meeting was set for 9 a.m., but Jackson arrived at 7, reviewing final preparations with Naomi. Security footage showed Kingston entering the building at 8:15, heading not to the boardroom but to his private office. He took the bait, Naomi confirmed, showing Jackson her tablet. The doctored Horizon specifications were accessed from his company account 4 minutes ago and transmitted to an external email address. Trace it, Jackson instructed. Already did. It belongs to William Ellis, former energy lobbyist, now senior advisor to Secretary Howard. The name struck Jackson oddly. Ellis? Yes, Naomi continued, not noticing his reaction. And I've confirmed Kingston has been promised a deputy secretary position if he helps delay Horizon until after the election. The current administration's largest donors are all traditional energy executives. The boardroom doors opened, and members began arriving. Kingston entered last, confident and composed, offering Jackson a sympathetic smile that now seemed sinister. Thank you all for coming, Jackson began, once everyone was seated. I've called this meeting because we've discovered a serious security breach regarding Project Horizon. Kingston maintained his neutral expression, but Jackson noticed his hand tightening around his pen. Someone in this room, Jackson continued, has been sharing proprietary information with government officials tied to our competitors. Murmurs filled the room. Kingston cleared his throat. That's a serious accusation, Jackson. Do you have evidence? Actually, Marcus, I do. Jackson nodded to Naomi, who distributed documents to each board member. These are transmission records showing confidential Horizon specifications sent from your company account to William Ellis, senior advisor to Energy Secretary Howard. Kingston's face remained impassive. I've known William for years. We were discussing potential regulatory hurdles, nothing more. Simply good business practice. Interesting you should mention William Ellis, Jackson replied, because his name appeared in another interesting place. He pressed a button, and the boardroom screen displayed a birth certificate. Zoe, would you join us, please? The boardroom door opened, and Zoe entered, her expression solemn. Board members, you remember Zoe Ellis, the nurse who helped save my life. What you don't know is that she's William Ellis's daughter. Jackson turned to Zoe, and Marcus Kingston's goddaughter, correct? The room fell silent. Kingston's composure finally cracked, shock evident on his face as he stared at Zoe. Yes, she acknowledged quietly. That's what I was trying to tell you yesterday, Jackson. Zoe was the perfect plant, Jackson explained to the stunned board. The nurse who discovered the plot, who better to control the narrative, except she actually did discover a plot, just not the one she was expecting to find. Kingston recovered, his expression hardening. Zoe, what have you done? What you should have done, she replied firmly. Chosen integrity over ambition. Jackson addressed the board again. What Marcus doesn't know is that Zoe came to me 3 days ago and revealed everything. How her father recruited her to infiltrate my medical care, supposedly to protect me from Charlotte and Philip while ensuring I received the best treatment. In reality, she was positioned to monitor the situation and report back. But something changed, Zoe continued, meeting Kingston's betrayed gaze. When I discovered Charlotte and Philip were actually trying to keep Jackson sedated, I realized I'd been manipulated. When I confronted my father, he told me it was necessary to delay Jackson's recovery until Horizon could be properly contained. Kingston stood abruptly. This is absurd. You can't possibly believe. We have the recordings, Marcus. Jackson interrupted, nodding to Naomi, who played an audio file. Kingston's voice filled the room. Zoe, you don't understand what's at stake. Harlow's solar technology threatens the entire energy sector. The Secretary has promised me a position where I can shape policy for decades. Sometimes progress requires management. Zoe's voice replied, by keeping a man unconscious against medical ethics, by betraying someone who trusted you for 20 years. As the recording ended, Kingston surveyed the room, recognizing defeat in his colleagues' faces. You're making a catastrophic mistake, he said coldly. Horizon isn't just about affordable energy. Tell them, Jackson. Tell them what it really does. I was planning to, Jackson replied calmly. At next week's demonstration, he addressed the board. Project Horizon does provide low-cost renewable energy, but its most revolutionary feature is its data collection system. The grid doesn't just distribute energy. It monitors usage patterns across the network and identifies statistical anomalies. Meaningless technical jargon. Kingston scoffed. Actually, Jackson continued, when deployed across multiple markets, Horizon can detect energy market manipulation, price fixing, and regulatory capture with 98% accuracy. It creates transparency in an industry that has operated in shadows for decades. Understanding dawned on the board members' faces. That's why Secretary Howard's donors were so desperate to delay Horizon until after the election, Naomi explained. The system would expose corruption that's been endemic for generations. Kingston looked around the room, then at Zoe, his expression bitter. You chose the wrong side of history, goddaughter. No, Marcus, she replied softly. I chose not to be on the wrong side of justice. Security personnel entered the boardroom. Mr. Kingston, the head of security, said, "Federal agents are waiting to speak with you regarding obstruction of justice and corporate espionage charges." As Kingston was escorted out, Jackson turned to the remaining board members. Project Horizon launches next week as scheduled. I expect your full support. When the boardroom emptied, Jackson and Zoe remained. You could have exposed me days ago, she said quietly. Why didn't you? Because everyone deserves the chance to choose their own path, Jackson replied. You were manipulated by people you trusted just as I was. The difference is you recognized it and made a different choice. What happens now? She asked. Jackson looked out at the city skyline. Now we build something better. 6 months later, the auditorium erupted in applause as Jackson concluded his presentation. On screens behind him, real-time data showed Horizon systems operating in 12 cities across 3 continents, providing affordable energy to communities long neglected by traditional utilities. The most remarkable aspect, Jackson told the audience of international energy officials, is that Horizon's transparency protocols have already identified 17 instances of market manipulation, resulting in regulatory actions that save consumers over $2 billion collectively. In the front row, Zoe smiled. After the Kingston revelation, she had expected to be pushed away. Instead, Jackson had offered her a permanent position heading the newly established Harlow Foundation for Ethical Innovation. Kingston had received a 15-year sentence for his role in the attempted murder and corporate espionage. Charlotte and Philip had accepted plea deals of 10 and 12 years respectively. Secretary Howard had resigned amid scandal, his energy industry donors facing multiple federal investigations. After the presentation, Jackson and Zoe walked through Solaris's new research campus, where diverse teams of scientists developed the next generation of Horizon technology. Your father asked to see you, Jackson mentioned carefully. William Ellis had received immunity for testimony against larger players in the conspiracy. I know, Zoe replied. I'm not ready yet. Jackson nodded in understanding. When you built your own identity separate from your family's expectations, that's something I respect immensely. Speaking of identity, Zoe said, stopping beside a wall bearing the Harlow Foundation logo, there's something I've been meaning to ask. When you were spelling out messages during those hospital nights, you kept returning to one phrase, truth creates light. Why? Jackson smiled. It was my mother's favorite saying. She cleaned office buildings at night, while raising me alone in our housing project apartment. She always told me that no matter how dark things seemed, truth would eventually create light. She would be proud, Zoe said quietly. Of both of us, Jackson replied. We both had to decide who we really were when everything was stripped away. Later that evening, they stood on the rooftop of Solaris Tower, now crowned with Horizon solar arrays that glowed softly in the twilight. Below them, the city's lights flickered to life, many powered by the technology they had fought to protect. The board approved the expansion to 30 more cities, Jackson informed her, including the neighborhood where I grew up. Your mother was right, Zoe observed, watching the city illuminate. Truth does create light. What neither of them could know in that moment of triumph was that their greatest challenges still lay ahead. The technology they had created was more powerful than even Jackson had imagined, capable of exposing corruption far beyond the energy sector into realms where even more dangerous interests would stop at nothing to keep their shadows hidden. But for tonight, they had proven that sometimes our darkest moments can indeed become the catalyst for our greatest impact, if we have the courage to remain true to ourselves when everything else falls away. In the hospital room where their unlikely alliance began, Jackson had discovered that true strength isn't found in wealth or power but in the integrity with which we face adversity. And Zoe had learned that our most important legacy isn't determined by our family name, but by the choices we make when those names no longer shield us from the consequences of our actions. Together they had transformed a conspiracy meant to destroy into a force for change, illuminating not just homes but the shadowed corridors of power too long protected from the cleansing power of truth. And that light was just beginning to spread.